Round 5 is upon us as the League of MVP takes another stride forward in its parade around the globe. Tonight we travel just 20 kilometers outside of the Hungarian capital of Budapest for the third installment of our 7-leg European stint, seeing us from Italy all the way to the Styrian Mountains. And in a season that looks to be mightily competitive, drivers are going to have to bring their best in order to thrive around one of F1's trickiest. My name is Zach Sweeney. Of course, I'm the new commentator for the League of MVP, and I'll be here to talk you through all of the action here today. But before we get into that, let's take a quick look as to how things racked up last time out. And it was, of course, David Depay who took victory in Barcelona. It was Burmeister in second with AJ rounding off the podium. Snoopy there in fourth with Sebastian rounding off your top 5. Then comes Smidge, Dino, Mitch, Svamp and Mike, your top 10, with David, the race winner, as well, taking the fastest lap, seeing an extra point added to his points total. And speaking of points totals, let's take a quick look as to how things rack up in the drivers' standings. AJ, one-times champion and the winner of the last time we came to the Hungaroring in the League of MVP. He sits on a fairly comfortable 13-point lead ahead of Snoopy, a fellow champion in the series, and both of them going to be gunning for their second title. Sebastian rounds off the top 3 with 55 points to his name, and David, our previous race winner and a 4-time reigning champion, in fourth. Mitch rounds off the top 5 in the Drivers' Championship, coming into round number 5. And now, finally, of course, it's not all about the drivers. There is a team dynamic to things as well. And as you can see, Ferrari sit fairly comfortably on a pretty decent 119 points total. Aston Martin there just in behind at 116 in a very close fight for second place. Unfortunately, a bit of a bridge down to the fight for third between McLaren, Mercedes and Red Bull, 54, 41 and 37 respectively for the final of the top 5. So a close fight for third, a close fight for first, but a bit of a bridge in between the two. And now we'll take to the live action. 10 minutes left in our 18-minute qualifying. And at the moment, it's David Depay that leads the timing tower. A 1:16.339 as it stands is the benchmark time. AJ and Burmeister, your top 3. Snoopy just in behind there in fourth, with Sebastian, your top 5. Then comes Lazy but Talented Cam, Josh, Dean and Roy, your top 10, with Mike, George, Smidge and Process, the final of those to round off those that decided to attend tonight. Unfortunately, we don't have fan favourite Mitch, unfortunately, with us today on the grid. He's had a couple of technical difficulties getting in tonight, and fingers crossed he can get himself in before the start of the race. But don't hold out too much hope. As it stands, David is on his next flying run of the session. Down in towards turn number 1, you want to be braking just at the start of the curve. Down to third gear, carry the momentum through. Then you're on the start towards the second braking zone at turn number 2. Looking for the 50 board. Off cambered in its nature is turn 2. So really got to hug the inside. Bring it back to the left, flat through turn number 3. And then you rise up the hill towards a blind apex, nearly flat out corner. Purple to the first sector and very neat and tidy through the first sector for David. In towards turn number 5, as I like to call it, caution curve. You cannot touch that inside in these Formula 1 cars. Very sensitive. Into the chicane, right then left, fairly easy affair, and then a flick to the left, of course, mid-speed through the middle sector for David. Trying to keep it nice and tidy, as neat and tidy as possible, really. Rounds off the second sector just through the right-hand flick of turn 10, and a little bit down, 1/10 down on his PB as he heads in towards turn number 12. Famous overtake for Kimi Räikkönen back in 2016, I believe. And then the penultimate corner, again, fairly similar in nature, the penultimate and the final corner, in the sense that you just got to hug it tight and get on the power as early as possible. Then DRS open on the sprint to the line for David. Is it an improvement? Indeed it is. Improves by just over half a tenth of a second to a 1:16.276. Has AJ got any response to that? And it looks to be the case, in all fairness, in his number 25 machine Ferrari. Through the middle sector was about a tenth and a half up-ish. Was AJ. So now into the final couple of corners, you can see flicking the Ferrari through. My favourite livery of the 2022s, by the way, is the Ferrari. I just love the red. But now on the run to the line, is it provisional pole? Yes, indeed it is for our championship leader, a 1:16.218. But of course, still a long way to go in qualifying. Also very close in their fight is this fight between Burmeister and Snoopy in that bid for 3rd place. Less than a tenth to separate the two of them, and very, very close in all fairness between all of the top 4. And you can see the AlphaTauri running his way through the final couple of corners there. Apologies if things change. This, again, I'm new to sort of broadcasting things myself. And pole, in fact, actually for Burmeister, who prefers to be referred to as just Burmeister, so fair play. But basically how things happen, I'm not really used to sort of doing the cams and the streaming and the commentating all at the same time. So, bit of insight. Usually, what will happen with the likes of Racesport TV or VCO or whoever, they'll have a dedicated person to do the cameras, so they'll do this bit and, you know, look at different cars, find the action, replays, etc, etc. And I'll just be here, push to talk, to call the action. Say, oh, here we go, we've got Lazy but Talented coming through the penultimate corner, and he's got an invalidated lap time. See, I don't really, you know, that's usually my job. But today I've sort of got to flick back and forth, make sure my mic's muted at the right times, make sure it's unmuted at the right times, make sure I'm on the right scenes, make sure I don't accidentally press any hotkeys to bring anything up at the wrong times, make sure the game's actually, you know, running. So it's a step into the unknown for me, step out of my comfort zone, but, you know, I've got to earn my keep, got to make sure I impress for the debut, of course. That's what I'm trying to do. Lazy but talented. We digress from that small little tangent. We're back to the live action. 6 minutes left to go in it, of course. And don't be shy in the YouTube chat as well. Those of you watching along, I can see all 8 of you in the chat. If you're watching along and you know, have anything to say, anything goes wrong with the stream, or you want to throw your predictions into the YouTube chat, by all means be my guest. I'm only here to call the action and to try and keep it interesting, but it'd be nice to bounce off you guys. I'm all by myself in the commentary booth. It'd be nice to have you there to sort of give me something to feed off. Bring me some points, conversation starters, anything along those lines. And of course, if you are enjoying, make sure you like, subscribe and turn on the bell to make sure you do not miss a thing when it comes to the League of MVP. Lazy but Talented into the pit lane, of course, so we'll follow along now with the Williams of Dino. P10 as it stands. 3/100th deficit back to Josh Morton in the McLaren through turn number 5. Blowing his way through the middle sector, using the most of each of the Rev Rangers. Sloppy though, unfortunately, on the power delivery of that Williams. About 2.5 tenths up to the middle sector though on his personal best time, which at the moment could see him well inside the top 10. I mean, he's there already, but sort of solidify himself in the top 10 ahead of Lazy but Talented there in 7th. Trying to hook the best apex possible, and unfortunately you can hear the traction control cutting in. Unfortunately, it was only about a 0.5 tenth improvement, good enough to get him inside the top 9 as it stands. But you could hear sort of the traction control clipping in for Dino, the blip, 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 sort of where he's put on too much and the engine is forced to cut itself out to not overdrive the rear wheels. Of course, while the Pirelli tyres are fantastic in their traction delivery, these Formula 1 cars are in excess of probably 1,000 brake horsepower and qualifying trim, and that's all going to the rear 2 wheels. So if you overstep the mark just a little bit, those rear tyres are going to spin. Too much lip angle, off you go in a bit, mate. Unfortunately for some. So yeah, Dino trying his best to keep the blipping to a minimum to maximise his power delivery. Of course, in a bid to have the widest availability, the widest inclusivity. So that's all right, it is now. For people. The League of MVP allow any assist apart from pit assist and ERS assist, I think, is the other one. So you're allowed any assist, automatic, racing line, traction control, ABS, etc., etc. So it is a very inclusive environment, you know, amateur friendly. You can get in and enjoy pretty much at any level, which I think is very, very important indeed. Also, guys, in the YouTube chat, just another thing. If I cut out and stop talking for any more than, say, 15-20 seconds, tell me, because that's mean I've been an absolute monkey and haven't unmuted my mic when I've gone to mute it to take a drink or just breathe. So if I have been an idiot, let me know. Again, as I say, I'm new to this. And in the commentary booth, you guys at home are my co-commentators. I'm here to call the action as best I can see it, but if I run out of things to talk about, if I run out of, you know, if there's a little bit of sort of people are spread out on track, I need you guys to sort of be my people to bounce off of. You know what I mean? Anyway, in terms of live action, which we are not short of in the final moments of qualifying, it's David DePay in P3. Race winner, of course, last time out at Barcelona, and is looking to make it 2 in 2. In terms of previous race results as well, let's take a quick look. David, of course, winning. That was his only win of the season. One of 2 podiums so far. Lacking a little bit of consistency, though, unfortunately, for David. He's gone from a DNF to 2nd place to no points scored, and then, of course, in 8th place at the sprint round at Imola, and then comes into Spain for 26 points. So looking to bounce back and continue a run of good form is David. Once you get good run result, it sort of rolls off the tongue like that and go from high to high in that regard. You use the confidence, you use the morale to propel yourself forward throughout the rest of the season. Unfortunately, not the best of laps for David DePay. He's going to need to recollect himself and bounce back a little bit stronger for his final run. The 87 machine of Bearmeister, though, is now rounding the final corner to start a run or end one. No, it's to start. 16.0 is the benchmark to beat. That is the pole time. DRS open on the run in towards turn number 1, and this will be his final lap. 1 minute 10 on the clock, which means he's rounding off to start, as I say, the final way round his final run. 10 people watching in the YouTube chat. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hope you are enjoying. Of course, as I say, my name is Zach Sweeney. I'm the new commentator for the League of MVP, and already didn't even start my debut, and already the guys were tuning into some other streams, already giving me some nice words of affirmation and giving me the encouragement. Looking forward to today, which is what I always like to see. The Mercedes, though, of George takes the provisional pole time of 1:15.9. A little bit ironic, a little bit coincidental that in a 2022 machine at the Hungaroring, a driver named George in a Mercedes is on pole position. Can anyone have anything to say about it? Bearmeister through the middle sector, a little bit down on his time, but still got a couple more corners left to bounce back. Only needs about a 10th and a little bit or so, but that is difficult to gain in the span of a couple of corners. What can the AlphaTauri do? Through the final corner now, got to try and keep it as tidy as possible. Now on the run to the line, we're going to take a quick look and react to it as we see it. The clock strikes 0, and it's not an improvement. He's got to go again, or is that qualifying in the bin? I think that might be the case. However, look out for AJ, our championship leader in the Ferrari. 1 more corner left to go for him, and he's purple to the middle sector. The 25 machine through the final corner now. And on that run to the line, is he going to be pole? Is he going to top George to the top flight of the Diamond Tower? And no is the answer to that one. A 1:16.1 is the best that he can conjure up. What about David? What's David doing? How's he doing in the McLaren? Final corner for him, of course. Needs a good about 3/10 now, just under, to be on pole. And it's not an improvement, unfortunately. Snoopy, anything to be said from the Aston Martin? The Haas of Process, unfortunately, having a bit of a spin. Only P14 for them. And now through the penultimate corner for the IndyCar, looking at Aston Martin. Very high nose for the Aston. Unfortunately, into the pit lane for Snoopy. And that does bring an end to qualifying proceedings. No one else really on a lap. No one else really improving. Maybe actually we could see one from the Alfa Romeo of Mike to see him inside the top 10. Brilliant stuff for 1:16.7 to 5s. Hello into Roy, Tanguy, Cameron and Gailey. All in the YouTube chat. Have noticed you, have not ignored you. Qualifying draws to an end, and of course we'll take a look at the standings when we do see them. Waiting, of course, for the session to officially end and then we'll run you through the standings. So with qualifying drawing to a close, as we say, it is the poleman George in the Mercedes, takes pole position. A 1:15.977 was the benchmark. There's the Dutchman of Burmeister, who will join him on the front row. AJ Mando and David round off 3 and 4, with Snoopy your top 5. Roy will round off P6 with Sebastian 7th, and joining him on the 4th row of the grid is the Alfa Romeo of Mike in a last qualifying run to 8th. An all-Irish 5th row to round off the top 10, with Lazy but Talented and Smidge 9th and 10th, with Cam, Dino, Josh and Process the rest of the field. Just moments away from the green flag then here for the Hungarian Grand Prix for round number 5 of the League of MVP. Season number 7, of course. Do not go anywhere. I'm going to take a step back, just give myself a breather, and I'll be back for the formation lap. Do not go anywhere. And it's green in Hungary. AJ Mando leads out of turn number 1, and it's Nan Breads from pole, unfortunately now dropping down in towards 2nd place. Burmeister just in behind in 3rd, but AJ takes the helm at the start of the race. Burmeister in 3rd, David DePay in 4th. Roy rounds up your top 5 with Snoopy, Seb, Lazy, Mike and Dino your top 10. Lap 1 of 35 and already straight into the action. No formation lap for these guys at all. Caught myself off guard just a little bit. Off guard, I do apologise in fact for missing the start of the race, but we're underway now in Hungary, and it's AJ, George and Burmeister separated by just a couple of car lengths each, and a crucial overtake in fact for AJ to get at the helm of the Timon Tower to start the race strong, of course. And now we're down in towards the end of the final section. You can see side by side just in the background there's Snoopy on the inside of Roy. Into the final sector now, and the Red Bull having a bit of a look, trying to have a look into the next left-hander. Also just in behind, sandwiched in fact between the two Aston Martins, is Roy, and into the pit lane very prematurely, unfortunately. AJ Mando though leads the first lap. What's going to happen to Roy? Maybe a bit of damage or something of the sort. But as they round off lap number 1, AJ from George, from Burmeister and David, and then Snoopy your top 5. Bit of a breakaway for the top 4, all 4 of them from different manufacturers. In fact, same true for the top 5. Ferrari, Mercedes, AlphaTauri, McLaren and Aston Martin. AJ looking to extend his championship lead. Sees himself ahead of George, who unfortunately, as I say, did fall down just a little bit in the initial moments of this Grand Prix. Nothing really of note as of yet, but what is crucial is that these guys settle themselves into a rhythm, get the sort of juices flowing, get themselves hyped up a bit more, and get themselves back into the mix. Talking of, unfortunately, what can happen if you don't get yourself into the rhythm is lazy but talented. Maybe you should take out the, I don't know, lazy not talented, I suppose, is the words to say with that one. Unfortunately, a bit of a spin in the initial moments, and when you don't get yourself into the correct mindset, into the correct rhythm, that is the risk that you run, not sort of getting into the feel of things, getting into that consistent sort of, okay, lap after lap after lap. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed at the start of the race as well with that. So many cars around you, high stakes, high pressure. And you can only imagine what AJ is feeling in the initial moments. And towards turn number 4, again for lap 3, DRS has been enabled on this time by the right, then the left of the chicane. And AJ is commanding the race at the moment, I think, is the crucial thing. He's got himself into a state of mind that is tuned into leading. Of course, he's no stranger to that. I mean, if we just take a quick look at his run of form already this season, we're on round number 5. 6 races so far, well, 5 races so far in this season. DNF at Australia, but then bounced back with 3 consecutive wins. The win at Canada, the win in the Imola sprint race, and the win in the Imola feature race, followed by a podium last time out at Spain. Now comes into Hungary with that run of form, with that great mindset, and is hitting the ground running. Wasn't quite pole position, but he's bounced back. A 1:19.9 now is the fastest lap time. And at the helm very comfortably is the championship leading Ferrari. Doing a great job, of course, and that's important to have that confidence. But what can George do? What can Bearmeister do? At the moment, not much to report of in terms of action. I'm looking at the timing sheet and not really anyone close enough to mount an attack. Trying to find the space, of course. We'll jump down to this fight between Mike in the Alfa Romeo and Smidge, of course, in the Alpine. Very close between the pair of them, but as I say, nothing really to report on because Smidge just hasn't quite got the legs down the straight or not quite been able to get close enough to mount a sizable offensive, which I think is a common theme throughout the field, is that you get close but then you just hit a waft of dirty air, unfortunately, which costs you in the grand scheme of things. And working off to round lap number 4, already flying by his time. Already a 7th of the way through this race. They are ticking those laps off one by one. Is George close enough? Setting the fastest lap, of course, on that previous lap. We'll ride on board with him. I don't know. I don't know where he can get these moves done. He needs a good run out of turn number 1. Isn't quite getting that. And then all he can do is funnel in single file, really, behind AJ. And the Mercedes, again, that's the trouble with Hungary. It's a great circuit, great to reward consistency and great to reward a driver's skill. But in terms of overtaking, it's fairly lackluster. Often tipped Monaco without the walls, of course. Monaco Monte Carlo is narrow with the walls. It needs no introduction. I mean, it's so difficult, and Hungary's almost the same, just without walls and with grass in place of it. You can't really find a way through without being a good second and a half quicker than the car around you. And that's the sort of the trap that George is falling into as it stands. The driver we're riding on board with now in the Mercedes. However, what is to note is, of course, what tyres they're on. Everyone inside the top 4 on mediums, everyone inside the top 10 on mediums, bar 2. Snoopy and Dino deciding to swap out. Of course, now in Formula 1, you can swap out the tyres however you please. You don't have to start the race on the qualifying set that you set your fast lap and qualify on. You can qualify on softs, use them for 10 laps, but then start on a fresh set for the race. Yellow flags through sector 3 is, of course, for Josh Morton. A spin for the McLaren. Not going to help his bid versus Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship, but able to get back going again. What's important, I think, for George is that he puts the pressure on. In sort of a stalemate like this, it's important to sort of play the psychological game, right? They're on equal tyres, equal pace, give or take a couple attempts a lap. There's nothing really George can do to mount an attack. So all he has to do is just sit in the mirrors of AJ and say, right, I'm going to knuckle down. I'm going to, show my nose in some corners. I'm going to try and get as close as I can and just fill that rearview mirror. So much so that AJ is forced to say, like, okay, right, he's there. And then he's looking in his mirror and he's like, okay, George is there. Breathe. Just try and compose myself. And oh no, that is exactly not what he wants to be doing. George, the pole sitter, round at the penultimate corner, rejoining the circuit as quickly as possible, of course. But now, overtaken by Snoopy and dropping maybe even outside of the top 5 as the two Aston Martins swing their way by. Is it going to be Sebastian that tries to find a way through? Is he just going to have to tuck in behind? I think that is going to be the case. And out to the right-hand side, not quite close enough. So a lucky escape there, of course. And just in behind as well, Mike and Dino running side by side in towards turn number 1. Tarnishing his momentum, though, is Mike, which could invite the Alpine through. Yeah. Interesting turn of events for George there, of course. Not what you wanted, and maybe spoke a little bit too soon. So that has really shaken things up in that front fight between AJ, Burmeister and David. Now separated by about a second is first and second. So AJ is doing his best to control the pace and settle into his own rhythm, but also break away from the DRS, I think, is also a fairly sort of important thing to do. I mean, we saw with George how he, I don't want to say relied on, but the DRS was a helping hand in staying that close to AJ. And if Burmeister loses that fortune, loses that advantage, it could allow AJ to run off with things into the distance, which of course is not what we want. We want a tight fight for the race lead, but we could still have a tight fight for second. And a resurgence, of course, don't forget, from George. We could see him fight his way back up the field. DRS, of course, and the overtake enabled. Is going to be a send from the Mercedes in towards turn number 1. Defensive goes the Aston Martin. Now outside line for George. Is he going to sail the long way round? Mediums versus hards, of course, is another thing to take into account. But George trying to recover from a mistake. Now gets the drive off turn number 1 and looking to the left. Inside line for him. Snoopy the long way round on older, harder compound tyres. Inside line for turn number 3. And that's George up into 4th place once more and trying to press on against his fellow sort of championship race-winning contenders is his aim, is to now try and get back into the swing of things, get back onto the back of them. But 7 seconds is a fairly sizable gap to claw back. But he set the pace in qualifying, and I think it speaks volumes about how little of an importance qualifying has got on the race. I mean, at a track like Hungary, granted, it's got a much bigger importance than it would at tracks, say, like Kota or Silverstone, where you can overtake. But qualifying is not the be-all and end-all. You know, there's a reason that iRacing only put 2 laps for the Daytona 24. There's a reason that we see countless times in sim racing that people can go from last to first. But the raw pace is there for George. A 1:19.9, matching the fastest lap set by AJ, the race leader. He is trying to redeem himself and trying to reclose that gap to the top 3. But yeah, it's all about consistency. The points are scored in the race over the 35 laps, not the 1 in qualifying. You only get you get 1 good run in qualifying, and that's it. But you've got to have 35 of those back to back to back, without mistakes, without faults, without spins. That's what crafts a race winner. That's what crafts a champion, more so when you do it race by race. Hooking up the qualifying session into the race, and then hooking that race up into the next qualifying session, into the race, into the next qualifying session, into the race. Over the course of a season is what forges a champion, like, you know, our 4-time champion of David DePay. who's at the moment in P3, our champion of AJ, and of course of Snoopy. You know, we've got we've got all of our champions right now on the field inside the top 5. All 6 champions so far are within the top 5. So a high echelon of talent. And now lap 10 of 35. Again, still keeping my eye on the timing sheets, making sure we don't miss anything in terms of the action. And let's check in at the front. AJ, again, no surprise, still leading the way. But closely followed by Burmeister. Then David, George, Snoopy, your top 5. Back to it. Lap 10 of 35. And a bit of a fight here materialising for P7. Sort of training behind Dino, who is on the hard compound tyre, so naturally is going to be a bit of a mobile chicane at this stage in the race. Looking to bounce back later on is the Williams. Followed closely by Mike, by Smidge, maybe even Cammy as well in a couple of moments' time. Again, a quick reminder, those of you that are watching along at home, if you are a driver or a friend or a family, make sure you comment along in the YouTube chat. Give me something to bounce off. It'd be nice to get some interaction. Nice to talk to you guys about something over the course of this race. Don't forget to like the stream if you are enjoying, subscribe, and turn on the bell notifications for more of the League of MVP as well. As I say, my name is Zach Sweeney. I've joined the league recently in a bid to provide commentary and broadcasting for you guys to hopefully enjoy. I hope I'm doing a good job. I mean, granted, yes, I did miss the start. I was expecting there to be a formation up. I thought I'd have more time, but no, we were straight into the 5 red lights. Caught me off guard just a little bit. Unfortunately did miss sort of that run from the lights to turn 1, which, yeah, is unfortunate. The pit window for this race, I mean, I would say it's going to be around sort of lap sort of 16, 17 for those on the mediums, maybe a little bit longer for those on the hards. Again, my strategical expertise on Formula 1 has dwindled down. I have not been as involved in the scene as I was a couple of years ago, but that is the sort of what I would say is the predicted strategy. Go about halfway on a set of mediums, then go the rest of the way on a set of hards to try and maximise your pace throughout the entirety of the race. So, pit window, lap 15 to 18 maybe. If they can stretch the mediums that long, then of course whack on a set of hards and go to the end. A little bit further down, we've got a fight materialising. Smidge versus Mike in their bid for 8th. Mike going defensive and pulling out to the right-hand side, or left-hand side I should say, of the circuit. Right-hand side of shot is Smidge getting the up and under. Now outside line for turn 2. I think Mike has just got the legs on the straight. Very late on the brakes though for Smidge. Could see him once again try and get the up and under. Now side by side as they run their way through turn number 4. A little bit too hesitant through turn 4 was Mike. Invites the Alpine now to get the run. Inside line for turn number 4. And gets the drive, but sideways, and all invites Mike and Cammy through. So very quickly gaining a place and losing not only 1 but 2. Took 1 step forward and 2 steps back, did Smidge. And falls now back to P10 in this race. Has to quickly bounce back and try and find his form once again, but easily done in that mistake in that regard. Doing his best to recover, as, I mean, so is George, and he's already been able to sort of take over a second out of the top 3. AJ, Burmeister and David DePay. Into turn number 2 once more as we approach the halfway point of this race. Lap 13 and 35, it has flown by despite the fact that we haven't had much in the way of action. And cutting down to the fight for 8th, you can see Cammy and Mike very, very close in how spicy this battle could get. nothing materialising as of yet. The Haas of Cami trying to work his way forwards. But again, as I say, nothing really of note. But when it... Apologies. When it comes to races like these, where it's very much a consistent, almost an endurance mindset. Again, I'm not entirely sure as to the sim racing extent that some of these guys have done, but you look to the world of iRacing and Assetto Corsa Competizione, R-Factor 2, you've got an extensive endurance racing scene over there where you do sort of 6, 8, 12, 24-hour races, where you really have to hunker down and try and be consistent, pick your moments well. And I think that's sort of the race and the mindset that these guys are starting to spill into in that sense, where it's just a case of drive it sort of 90-95% of your limit, try and reduce the mistakes, pick them off as they come. Don't drive overly aggressive, because what you risk is falling into a trap like Josh Morton, who unfortunately has not had the best of days in the opening moments and is, you know, spinning and making those clumsy mistakes. Same too like we saw with George earlier on. It's a case of put the laps in, you know, turn into a Scalextric car. Just go around and around and around and around. Put those lap times in and sort of, not in a sense switch off, but forget about the race. Just focus on the driving. You know, hit your apexes. Unfortunately, we have lost Josh Morton from this session as Snoopy Judd gets himself a 3-second time penalty for multiple track limits incursions. But yeah, you know, just go around, hit your apexes, accelerate, brake at the right point. And honestly, you'll notice that over the course of an entire stint, you will go quicker. Of course, that's easier said than done. But in races like these, where it is going to be a little bit spread out, a little bit more focused on a strategical game, playing chess, not checkers, you're going to win this race in the pit lane, like an endurance race, where you save your tyres. Not necessarily save your fuel, because refueling is not allowed in Formula 1 since, I think it was 2010. But you get into that mindset. Save your tyres, go as long as you can go as fast as you can for as long as you can, then come in, then go on for a fresh set, and then press on. But I mean, to be fair, what we have got in this race is a close first and second, very very close first and second, which is something that I think we can all be happy about, considering the risk that we thought was going to happen was AJ and Burmeister. Or AJ, I should say. AJ was going to break away from Burmeister, is what we were scared of. That the Ferrari, once George had his spin from pole, was then going to fall back a little bit. But AJ has... I don't want to say AJ has slowed down, more in the sense that Burmeister has stepped up to close the gap and to stay within DRS. He sort of just cast a fishing hook onto the rear end of that Ferrari and is trying to reel him in with the DRS. That virtual tow hook that keeps you in tow. You know, very creative, whatever. But in terms of penalties, actually, let's have a quick lineup as to how people are looking. Their penalties are as follows. Snoopy with 3 seconds, Sebastian with 3 seconds, and Process all with 3 seconds. Interesting low into the pit lane is Burmeister right at the start of the pit window. David and George both in as well, presumably for a set of hard compound tyres. AJ continues on for a lap. And into the pit lane come the 2nd, 3rd and 4th place runners of this race. Going fairly short on their stint, but I guess they are just under halfway. Those hards should easily carry them to the end. And trying to go for the undercut, I think, Burmeister. What's crucial is it's now a race against time. He needs some clear air, which he's got. It's a luxury that he's got that. He needs to get those tyres into a working window, get them warmed up, and press on. Put the lap in while AJ is still out there on 15-lap-old tyres. Mike, he's going to be saying to him, go away. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to look at you. I don't want you to overtake me. I don't want any pressure. I want to look forwards and make the time up. 0.5 of a second was around about the gap between Burmeister and AJ as they came into the pit lane. So that's sort of the gap that he's going to try and be able to make up relative to AJ during this sort of interim moment, provisional moment of the race. AJ into the pit lane. So now all eyes are going to be turning to that main straight between himself and Burmeister. In towards turn 11 comes Burmeister. 2 corners and a straight. He's going to be hoping that Ferrari has a fairly slow pit stop. Up to the Jackson, on to the hard compound, and now running his way out of the pit lane Oh, this is going to be close. This is going to be really, really close. Out of the final corner now and dropping his pit lane limiter anytime will be AJ. What is the gap going to look like? No change at all. Maybe even advantage AJ into the braking zone of turn number 1. Crunch time for Burmeister. Even more now. He needs those tyres to be warmed up. He needs AJ's to stay cold and he needs to put the pressure on. This is the time to do it. Burmeister through turn 2, you can see how much AJ is struggling for traction. Use the deployment now. Are they going to go side by side up the hill towards turn number 4? I think they might. Burmeister on the outside and AJ, the championship leader, on the inside. Backing out of it though and maybe going for the dive in towards turn number 5. Bit of a look, given the space, but backs out of it does Burmeister. Crucially trying to put some pressure on once again. Inside line for turn number 6 and 7. Once again, not quite close enough. It was close, but no cigar for the 87 machine. The AlphaTauri now second place, well, 4th place in the current running, 2nd place in the provisional running after pit stops have filtered themselves out. But now he's going to try and maybe have a bit of a look, ducking and diving, rocking around the Christmas tree as the AlphaTauri looking for the space. David DePay and Mike also running side by side. That's because the McLaren is trying to make up amends, trying to get back up onto the back of these two in front. Through the final corner now. And already defensive, immediately defensive. DRS open for the AlphaTauri. Is he going to be using any deployment? Not quite close enough now. And George sets the fastest lap. He's now ahead of Mike and closing in on that gap. He's been on those hards for 2 laps and is only about 5 seconds off the race lead. Do not count out George of this race. This could still happen. Well and truly still happen. I mean, after, let's not kid ourselves, a fairly lackluster first stint of this race, the second one promises more in the sense that we've got a resurging George. We've got David DePay trying to close the gap. We've got Burmeister versus AJ fighting it out, duking it out for victory. And still a lot of narratives left to be unfolded over the course of the Hungarian Grand Prix. We're now into sort of the final chapter, into the final stint. And now the final half of the race along with it. Final corner, and AJ seems to be more in tune with those hard compound tyres than Burmeister, who unfortunately is falling back a little bit. David DePay though seems to have mastered them and is closing the gap. A 1:19.2. Victoria pushing on for Snoopy, who at the moment is leading the way, though still has to come into the pit lane using those hard compound tyres to the full extent of their lifespan. Will then come into the pit lane and press on a set of mediums to the end. Hopefully can try and regain the gap, sort of doing the reverse of everyone else and taking the sort of quote-unquote penalty of a slower car earlier. What he does get is fresh, softer tyres and a lighter car. These guys come into this race with a full tank of fuel for a 50% race, so around about, I want to say 60, 70 kilos of fuel. To get to the end, no refueling of course, naturally. So 60, 70 kilos worth of fuel for a 35 lap race distance, and as they go around, they burn that off. As they burn it off, they get lighter. As they get lighter, the chassis becomes more agile, can respond quicker to movements, not got quite as much inertia. So as it turns, the car wants to turn. As it accelerates, it wants to accelerate. As it brakes, it wants to brake. It wants to respond to the inputs. So you couple that with some softer tyres and fresher tyres, Snoopy is going to be quick. Dino also into the pit lane. He's off the hard compound and will be going on to the softer middle range of the Pirellis, onto the yellow banded medium compound tyres. Out of the pit lane now and rejoining the circuit around about 6th place, just ahead of Sebastian. Our focus has to remain at the front, checking in just with the rest of the field. We've got Roy on the back of Process, though still yet to make a second pit stop is Roy, trying to recover from early lap contact, I believe, is what we put it down to. Came in at the start of the opening lap and has since put on those set of mediums and is trying to make his way on the 2-stop strategy. work our way again back to the front, and David DePay is closing the gap. So could we have a 3-horse race for the race lead? Ferrari versus AlphaTauri versus McLaren. Champion versus up and coming versus a 4-time champion veteran in the form of David DePay. Race winner last time out at Spain as well. If you did miss it here, how they wrapped up after round number 4. As you can see, it was David DePay. Unfortunately, we have lost Smidge from a crash here, and that has brought out a full course caution and the safety car in this race with 15 laps left to go. Poor timing, I think, actually, for Snoopy. If he'd gone one more lap, he might have gotten away with it. Has that brought out the safety car? I think it might have. The game is not telling me, but I think so. We're going to take a look at the Marshall boards. Yeah, safety car, full course safety car is in effect. Bunches up the field, brings everyone back down, crawling to the Mercedes AMG pace. And they'll all queue up behind AJ. Is anyone going to make the switch onto a fresh set of tyres? Softs, mediums? What could make it is the question. Snoopy, though. Victoria, I think you're in for a treat here. I think you're in for a big treat, because Snoopy on some fresh mediums, lighter car, very close to the top 4. However, is carrying that penalty. That could be his Achilles heel. Could be the ball and chain around his ankles. Could prevent them from moving their way back towards the front. Or if they do, could drop them back after the race. It's going to be a case of getting to the front and going. Checking out. A race against time for Snoopy. But yeah, now into the safety car window. Anyone in? AJ trying to dummy it. Trying to play some sneaky tactics. Using his championship prowess. Victoria saying, let's see, fingers crossed. Yeah, well, here we go. Into the pit lane though. Burmeister and David and George. All in. To what? Onto what? What are we saying? What are we thinking? What are they going on to? Into the pit lane for the Mercedes. Mediums, mediums, and mediums all in. Who comes out ahead? David DePay inside ahead of the AlphaTauri. Great job from the McLaren pit boys. And out back onto the circuit. Net P2. Well, actually, not even a net P2. On track P2. Not even a net P2. He's actually in P3 because of the safety car. Snoopy is in front of him. And now AJ could be in a bit of trouble. What are we thinking? I mean, there's none of you in the chat. Let's get your thoughts and opinions. Was it a mistake not to pit? And it's not the Mercedes. Made a mistake. It's the Aston Martin. Of course, it's the Aston Martin. The DBX, I believe, or is that the medical car? Either way, the Aston Martin, the drivable car in the Formula 1 2022 game. Yeah, queuing up behind the Aston Martin, the British green safety car. Yeah, none of you watching at home. Was it a mistake? Could... I mean, it's not even a case of he can come back in, because he can't really get away with it. He's going to lose too much track position. He's just going to have to stick it out on them hards. What do you guys think? in then, of course, for the final stages of the safety car proceedings. And AJ is the leader. Here's how they rack up after 23 laps. AJ, Snoopy, David, Burmeister and Sebastian, your top 5, with Dino, George, our pole sitter, down to P7, with Cammy, Mike and Lazy, your top 10. Then comes Roy and Process, the rest of the field. 2 DNFs of Smidge and Josh Morton. And that is the 12 car field. Safety car is in this lap. So the Aston Martin Bird Mylander will pull off to the right hand side into the pit lane for a dash to the finish. This is my redemption for missing the start. We get the safety car restart. AJ Mando declares at the pace. Snoopy will try and be as alongside him as possible in that Aston Martin before we go racing once more for the final 13 laps of the Hungarian Grand Prix. And AJ gets the jump. But is it going to be Snoopy Dread that tries to pull out to the left-hand side? Maybe even the right-hand side. Outside line, of course, now for turn number 1. And the Aston Martin on the fresh and medium tyres goes the long way round, side by side now with the one-times champion and the championship leader. They are still emerged side by side. David DePay also in the mix in towards turn number 2. And Snoopy Dread might just be able to take the lead here. Following him through goes David DePay. And from first to third in the span of 3 corners, AJ Mando is struggling in the early stages. Burmeister also having a bit of a look, but getting caught behind through turn number 4. And still trying to find the gap. Crunch time now for the Aston Martin. 3 seconds he needs between now and the checkered flag to win this race. What a restart. What a jump from Snoopy. What a poor showing from AJ. Fortunately has 13 points in the balance to fall back on in the case of, you know, dropping back some points in the championship, but still not what he would have wanted at all. Now the AlphaTauri Burmeister inside line through turn 12. AJ Mando keeps him honest on the outside, slowing the progress of the AlphaTauri, running side by side through the penultimate corner, and a bit of a spin, bit of contact, managing to point the right way though. The 87 machine of Burmeister keeps the nose pointing the right way. And everyone in the YouTube chat, go, 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 go. From Moon, go Snoopy, go. And now George trying to put some pressure on, gets himself inside the top 5 ahead of Sebastian, who pulls to the right, trying to maybe go for another dummy. But after 1 lap under green flag conditions, Snoopy, David, AJ, Burmeister, George, Sebastian, Mike, Cammy, Lazy, Roy and Dino. Unfortunately, we lost Process in the proceedings of the initial restart. Bit of side-by-side moments and a spin. Mike in the barrier and beached. He's beached. He's stuck. Full course yellow. Safety car into effect. 8th gear. He's stuck. He's beached. You can see the floor has lifted up the tyres off the surface. Oh, he's managed to get back going again. Finally. What happened there is these Formula 1 cars have such a small ground clearance, trying to maximize the suction ability of low pressure air getting underneath the car and forcing a vacuum to, you know, drive the car, force that mechanical downforce to suck the car into the road, so when they turn they've got the grip. But of course, when you've got that small of a ground clearance, once you raise the floor up like a skateboard on a rail, the wheels aren't in contact with the road. You just slide, and when you're stopped, you've got no momentum. You can't regain momentum because the driving force of the car hasn't got anywhere to grip to. There's no friction, there's no drive, there's no traction. But fortunately, Mike has been able to get back going again. Ooh, 1 month to go before Formula 1 returns. What are your predictions for the 2023 Championship? Fantastic question, Victoria. Thank you very much. And gives me something to talk about during the safety car period. In terms of Formula 1, I think it's not going to be a massive progression of last year, really. I think that the same teams are going to be at the front. They've used 22 as a learning curve for the new regulations to test. Each race has really been a testing session, finding out what works, what doesn't work, like we saw with Mercedes, trying different setups and components and strategies and things like that. They've used the first year to hone their abilities, and now into 23 maybe we could see some progression from midfield teams, but it's not going to be a case of Aston Martin shooting to the World Championship in my books. I think we're still going to have Red Bull and Ferrari at the helm. Don't forget, you know, Fred Vasseur is now team principal of Ferrari. What could that entail? Could it be a step up? Could it be a step down from Mattia Binotto? Presumably, as the Ferrari CEO would say, it's a step up. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made that switch. But what can Frederic Vasseur do in a new environment? Still was always a part of the Ferrari family at Alfa Romeo and then moved into Ferrari. But, you know, new environment, goes from fighting for points to now fighting for championships. But I think he's going to do quite well. But we are, as I say, we're going to have Red Bull, Ferrari, and I think we're going to have Mercedes too, in a consistent basis, on a consistent basis, at the front with the top 6, like we had sort of 2018, 2019 era, where we had Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes making up that top 6. And we're going to see Lewis Hamilton, George Russell fighting for wins and podiums, like we saw last season, back end of last season. But in terms, I know what you're asking. I've avoided the question. What are the championship standings going to look like? I think maybe Max can make it 3-3. Is Leclerc going to make a step up? It depends. Again, it depends how good the cars are, how good the teams are. We could see Lewis gunning for an 8th. We could see George gunning for a 1st. Carlos, Leclerc. We've got 6, you know, top quality drivers in Max Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, Hamilton, Russell. 6 of the world class of the world class. Yeah, up there in good teams. So I think it could be any of them. Again, it is going to be a case of consistency. If of the, I mean, in a sense, you've got Red Bull that have a clear first driver and second driver. Max definitely is the driver of that team. Same to kind of. I don't actually. To be fair, not even with Ferrari, because Carlos and Charles are pretty close in terms of pace, consistency-wise as well. I mean, Sainz was able to beat Leclerc in 2021. So I think, yeah, again, it could be any of them. Not to count Perez out, he could still be in there. He just needs a bit of a step up from what we saw last season. But yeah, I think Max, Lewis, George, Sainz, all of them could be in good effect. Safety car in this lap, but also coming in could be the Papaya Orange McLaren of David Depay. What could have been a race victory has now turned into contact with the Aston Martin in the dying stages of the safety car period. And Snoopy, well, he's not going to be complaining at all. He's going to control the pace. He needs a 3-second jump with just 9 laps to go. Lap 27 of 35, we go green once more in Hungary, and it's Snoopy that leads the way. David Depay struggling, limping on a poor front wing, and AJ trying to get the jump as they run their way down the pit straight for the first time on lap 28 of 35. Outside line for the Ferrari, trying to get the jump, but the McLaren goes in deep. Could we see the Ferrari trying to get the up and under? The answer to that is no, and in fact could actually lose some places. Burmeister into the mix, gets himself in a second place, outside line for turn number 2, and AJ side by side with the Mercedes of George, ahead now, up maybe into the podium places, gets the switch back, up and under through turn number 4, now side by side as they run their way up the hill towards the quick flick left, and 3 wide in towards the next left-hander. Oh my word, oh my goodness me, and it's George that just about hangs on in the balance. AJ there in 4th, but David Depay falling backwards against the likes of Sebastian and Royal, who's got himself inside the top 6, inside line for turn number 6 and now 7, and David Depay tries to get the up and under. The switchback stays in 6th place but goes in too deep. What does Royal have to say about that? Carnage, chaos, drama, excitement in the opening stages of the second safety car restart of the Hungarian Grand Prix. Season 7, round 5 of the League of MVP. And now Royal gets the drive. Inside line for turn 11. Gets it stopped too for good measure. There's Lazy but Talented. Inside line also following him through. Now becomes outside. Brilliantly done. Calm, composed, collected. Into the pit lane comes David. Naturally so. Does not have the legs, not have the capabilities to continue fighting, and unfortunately that is race over for our previous race winner. And what could that spell for his championship? Who knows? Who knows? But unfortunately into the pit lane. And as I said before, I mean, let's just have a quick look as to how things racked up race-wise. I mean, you can see it there. All there in the limelight of David's unfortunate sort of despair. He went from a DNF to a second to no points to an 8th place to a win, and now once again to scraping a point if he's lucky. It's not been the most consistent run possible for David, but he's trying to push forward, trying to be better, and it's going to need to be a perfect season from here on out, I believe. At least for me. Again, I've only seen him for 29 laps. I can't call a driver, but in my experience of what I've seen before in sim racing, I don't claim to know everything, but I've been around for quite a bit. You know, not to toot my own horn, commentated on the top flight of some esports on VCO and like to Team Redline, Red Bull Racing Esports, etc, etc. You know, that's the theme, that's what happens. That's how things can go wrong, and that's how you win championships, is consistency. So a poor start, fine. Claw back, redeem yourself. Like what George is doing right now in this race. You know, shrink down a season to the span of 35 laps, and George is doing exactly what David needs to do. Good start with a pole. Drop down in the open stages, but has since bounced back. He's not made a single mistake since that spin, but instead has set the timing sheets ablaze. Fastest lap, fastest lap, fastest lap. Made the right strategy call, hit the ground running in those opening moments of the second safety car restart. Sits third, 2.1 seconds off the race lead with 5.5 laps left to go. We round off halfway through lap 30 and Snoopy leads 1.3 clear of Burnmeister. Then comes George in third, and then a little bit back comes AJ, who's really struggling on those hards. We knew it was going to happen, I think, in terms of in terms of how quickly that fall was. Hards versus mediums, fresher mediums too, lighter fuel. AJ was he was just going to be a sitting duck. Another fastest lap, 89 for George. Brilliant stuff, and is closing the gap bit by bit, but time is not on his side. He needs to get a move on, really, ideally, for the Mercedes. He needs to get past Burnmeister and start his offensive charge towards Snoopy, because it's one thing to catch, it's another thing to pass, it's another thing entirely to stay in front. But as it stands, this is the fight for the lead between Burnmeister and George. Because of Snoopy's 3-second penalty, David Apey on softs, fast lap, 17.6, should be an extra point going his way for the second race in a row, and it doubles his point tally over the course of round number 5. But yeah, Burnmeister's not going to want to give up that second place, particularly if Snoopy's within 3 seconds, because it gives him the chance to win the race, and what I believe to be his first race of the season. We're having a bit of a look for Burnmeister. And yeah, his best result so far is second place last time out at Spain. What could be a first win as well for Snoopy, and as well, either way, we're getting a first time winner this season. George has had an eighth, a sixth, an eighth, a seventh, and then 3 DNSs. So right now he's trying to bounce back and get those 25 points added to his points total. It should be a fairly helping hand in terms of the championship. 32 of 35, as I say. Time ticks down, time rolls its tanks. And the importance, really, a bit of a spin actually, we'll come back to that in just a second. Sebastian, unfortunately, having a go around off the exit of turn 2 and beached on the curb, not getting much in terms of movement, but managing to get back going again. Really struggling to do so. The curbs at the Hungaroring are lethal. But the importance that George gets the drive and tries to get the move done on Burnmeister is ineffable, really. It can't be described with words. He really has to just get through, maybe start the drive towards Snoopy to secure the spot at the top of the podium to win this race. Final corner once again, and it seems to be a fairly good run. He seems to be very, very close. Does George in the Mercedes, forcing Burnmeister in the AlphaTauri to go defensive. DRS rear wing open, no energy deployment for the AlphaTauri. Is we going to see the Mercedes dart to the inside? He goes right, then straight back to the left, darting his way to the racing line once again with the DRS, the rear wing flap open. I think he's bottled it. I think that was a golden opportunity to take this, take the second place, and he's bottled it. And he has I don't know. He's got, what, now 3 laps left of this race. 3 more opportunities, and that was one of them. He should have gone for that move. Just darted it to the inside. Let's take a quick look, actually, while we can, as to how they're doing in terms of ERS deployment. You can see 21% there for George, 11 for Burnmeister. How's Snoopy doing? 22. So everyone really, actually, is struggling a little bit with their electronic recovery system. 140, 160 brake horsepower extra at the push of a button. He's going to need that to strike. Coming on to the penultimate lap of this race, lap 34 of 35, and it's George versus Burnmeister versus Snoopy for the race lead. If anything happens between the AlphaTauri and the Mercedes, you can bet your bottom dollar that Snoopy is going to try and step up to take the win, but too far back. Here's George. Nothing into turn 1. Anything behind. AJ versus Lazy. Softs versus Hards. Both of them on no energy. Fight for 4th. And it could go the way of Lazy if he gets his foot down, gets a move on. But it's a 4-way fight for 4th between AJ, Lazy, Roy and Mike. But nothing coming to fruition at this stage. Less than a second, the gap between 1st and 2nd. And that could be Burnmeister's saving grace. If he latches onto the back of Snoopy, it's going to be a win regardless. But what it could be is, it's whether he's 1 second back or within a second. As long as he finishes in 2nd place, 3 seconds behind Snoopy, he takes the win. But if George gets the jump, then it's George's for the taking. So Burn needs to have the DRS, use Snoopy as his sort of last line of defense, give himself that extra speed boost. And now onto the final lap of this race, the final run down the pit straight fully, and it could come down to this. George needs a run, but he's not got it. And DRS open, of course, for Burnmeister. It was deployed for about a second. Defensive goes Snoopy as well. Everyone not really knowing what to do. What can they do? Nothing. No way through as it stands. Any movement a little bit further back between Lazy and AJ. Again, nothing happening here. Mike versus Dino, nothing. Roy had a bit of a spin on that previous lap. So now on the final lap, lap 35 of 35. And it could go Burnmeister's way. A first victory of this season. Tops his previous best of 2nd. But Victoria might be having their heads in their hands when it comes to the end of this race. Because it's going to be an on-track victory for Snoopy, but after penalties, it's going to go the way of Burnmeister unless there's anything they can do about it now. It needs to be a mistake. It needs to be a last lap lunge from George, who's actually got a pretty good run off of turn number 10, having a bit of a look in towards turn 11. Oh my word, perilously close. But now in towards the final 2 corners, could we see George go for the send? Defensive goes the AlphaTauri. Outside line for George. Could he get it done? It'll quickly become the inside for the final corner. He gets covered off by Burnmeister. And now into the final corner for the final time. It'll be Snoopy that sees the checkered flag first. But the victory is going to go the way of the AlphaTauri. For the first time in Season 7, Burnmeister takes victory at the Hungaroring for the Hungarian Grand Prix. It's George Jornan Breads GF in 2nd with Snoopy in P3. AJ Mando comes home to hang on in the balance for P4. And Lazy rounds off the top 5. Then comes Mike, Dino, Roy, David and Sebastian, with Cammy the only non-point scoring finisher of this race. A good race indeed. A good race indeed. It was eventful. I think to see how close George got in those final moments was remarkable. Really had me on the edge of my seat. I was like, oh, hang about. What's going on here? Great race, Snoopy. Congrats for P3. An on-track victory. And as far as the standings are concerned, it was a podium as well. A lot to write home about. A lot of positives to take. But for Burnmeister, there's the victory. Driver of the day goes to Dino as well in the Williams for a pretty good result today as well. And as they rack up after 35 laps, round number 5 of the League of MVP season number 7, here's how they racked up in terms of the finishing order. I can tell you for free, it was Burnmeister in the AlphaTauri that took victory. Still waiting for the final results to load up, and then we'll round off the stream. Unfortunately, that is the end of the action. But yeah, the game loading perilously slowly, and onto the podium. Very deserved victory for Bearmeister. And here's how they rack up. Finally, after 50 minutes of racing, 35 laps, the Dutchman of Bearmeister takes victory from second place on the grid to first place on the race. George, our pole sitter, a fantastic effort from the Mercedes driver. Pole, spin, recovered, safety car restarts, and second place, so close to the victory. Snoopy, the Frenchman, rounds off the podium with AJ and Lazy, your top 5. Then comes Mike, a pretty good result from 8th on the grid, with Dino, your driver of the day. Roy and David, 8th and 9th, with the fast lap going the way of the McLaren. Sebastian rounds off the top 10, a great result for the Finn, though was asking for better after 7th place in qualifying. Cam 11th to 11th in the Haas, with the DNFs of Process, Smidge, and Josh Morton. That is it then, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk you through my first round of the League of MVP, the 5th round of their Season 7. I'll be back in a week, don't you worry. We head to Paul Ricard Le Castellet for the French Grand Prix on the 12th of February. Be back here 7 p.m. British time. And, of course, 8 p.m. CET for those of you in the European region of the world. Whatever time zone it is for you, whether you're American, Singaporean, whatever time zone you're in, make sure you tune in for round number 6 for the French Grand Prix. My name has been Zach Sweeney. I've been here in the commentary booth talking you through everything sim racing. But until next time, take care. We'll see you soon, and bye-bye.